1999, the WWF was going through a resurgence it hadn't experienced since the mid-90s. $251.4 million and $56 million. That's how much revenue and profit WWF had in 1999. Needless to say, the wrestling business was on fire. So much in fact that WWF tried their hand in other ventures, one being a themed restaurant. No doubt trying to cash in on other successful themed restaurants such as the Hard Rock Cafe and Planet Hollywood. Located in Times Square, New York, the former Paramount Center was now WWF New York, opening its doors in January of 2000. It was a complex consisting of a retail store selling WWF merchandise on the first floor, a nightclub, restaurant, and underground arcade. The grand opening even had top stars like The Rock attending, and was heavily promoted during commercial breaks on WWF programming. It's not sure if people were expecting the likes of Stone Cold Steve Austin and The Rock there every night, but even after the grand opening, there were still appearances by wrestlers, but they were mostly mid-carders, including Test and Hardcore Holly. The restaurant was promoted so much that both WWE New York and Times Square were even featured as backstage areas in both video games SmackDown Shut Your Mouth and Here Comes the Pain. The obvious draw was wrestling fans who visited the restaurant would be able to watch pay-per-views, Monday Night Raw and SmackDown, as well as Sunday Night Heat, which aired from the complex between 2000 to 2002. In addition to this, UK-only pay-per-views such as Insurrection and Rebellion would be aired at the restaurant at no extra cost. They also hosted signings, usually when a new book or DVD related to the wrestler was released. However, despite advertised as a wrestling-themed restaurant, it featured relatively little WWF-related memorabilia, unlike WCW's Nitro Grill, which even though was a catastrophic failure, still possessed wrestling-themed items on the menu, such as a gold burger and crippler crossface cheesesteak. WWF New York strangely only had one or two wrestling-themed items, with many who even ate there critiquing the food to be abysmal. But beyond the merchandise store and a small Andre the Giant handprint, where fans could measure their hand against, you'd never guess you were inside a wrestling eatery unless you went there on a night where there was a special event. According to PW Insider, the most popular nights there were when pay-per-views were broadcast, as for $125, fans could get VIP seating, a 3-course gourmet meal, sit in front of a huge screen to watch the event, and take the pay-per-view chair. There were also $50 general admission seating for the same events where fans could eat from a buffet line and watch the show on one of many TV screens in the facility. But despite the popularity of the Attitude Era when the facility launched, it was never a huge success. Even with its prime location in Times Square, airing Raw, SmackDown, as well as a special edition of SmackDown with no commercials, US as well as UK pay-per-views, the days where there were no regular shows or WWF wrestler appearances, the place would almost be dead. One Reddit user shared his experience of WWF New York saying, "I went once on a random weekend. The menu was limited and simple, and the food was okay. They had wrestling content on a short loop, maybe 2 to 3 minutes, so you heard the same things over and over and over again during dinner. It was fun to browse the store, and I'm sure they drew some wrestling fan tourists from out of town, but getting a decent crowd once a month for a pay-per-view wasn't going to sustain it in a spot that expensive. Still, it was pretty cool that the WWE had a Times Square presence for that long. It probably always lost money, but it was more a brand promotion thing." During the WWF's legal battle with the Worldwide Fund for Nature in 2000, the WWF was forced to change its name, launching the Get the F Out marketing campaign, and had to change all of its references from WWF to WWE. Oddly, instead of just renaming the complex to just WWE New York, the company changed the name entirely to WWE The World. But shortly after the name change in February 2003, WWE CEO Linda McMahon decided to close the complex, explaining the closure is so that WWE could concentrate more on their global efforts. Whilst the restaurant and nightclub were closed down immediately, the retail store remained open until April of that year. It's accepted the main reason for the closure was possibly due to the amount of rent charged in Times Square. The massive toy chain Toys R Us, who recently went into administration, had to close its flagship store in Times Square in 2015. According to a spokesman for the toy chain, rising rent costs were behind the decision to close, as the price per square foot of the ground floor space had ballooned from $400 per year when the shop opened in 2001 to $2,000 this year. With 21,000 foot of ground level space to its name, that means the Times Square store was costing Toys R Us at least $42 million per year in rent, without accounting for the additional 89,000 square foot on the floors above. It's no doubt the rising costs and rent were related to its official closing. 3 years after its closure, the Hard Rock Cafe took over the property and has remained open ever since, outlasting many of its rivals and becoming the most popular themed restaurant in Times Square. However, WWE returned to the location for the 2006 Diva Search finale and again for WrestleMania 24 and 25 press conferences. Since then, WWE has not revisited it, declaring it another failed venture in McMahon's quest to market anything he can. Did you enjoy this video? Would you like a video on WCW's failed Nitro Grill and Pastamania? Let us know in the comments down below, subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you next time with some more wrestling content.